Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe, coming to you live from Sonoma, California, where I've been attending a small business mastermind. Today we're talking about something that on the surface looks like agriculture and tourism, but underneath is a case study in economic gravity. This is the result of direct observation and conversation with people who are local in the market. Northern California is wine country. Napa, Sonoma in particular, have an aura of permanence. The rolling hills, the beautiful tasting rooms, the hospitality, the luxury brands, and of course a global reputation that's been built over decades. It's one of my favorite places to visit. And something that has that much cultural phenomenon, that much momentum, people assume it's immune to basic supply and demand, and unfortunately it's not. There's a growing perception right now that the region is overbuilt. There's a surplus of grapes, and that many wineries, including some well-known names, are marginally profitable or in some cases losing money. Now, I'm not here to call out anyone's financial statements. I'm here to unpack the mechanics. The mechanics apply to real estate or virtually any other industry. So let's start with the simple framework. Every business lives inside a box of four forces: supply, demand, capital cost, and regulation. Now, we're not going to talk about capital cost today. When supply expands faster than demand, prices compress. When regulation rises, costs increase and flexibility disappears. When all three move against you at once, even great operators can find themselves trapped. Now, wine's a product with a long production cycle. You plant the vineyard years before you have any meaningful yield. You invest in equipment and barrels and facilities and tractors and all this other stuff before you even know the consumer's going to want your product 5 years from now. So supply decisions are made with a huge delay in feedback, and that's one of the problems. In an expansion phase, everything looks rational. Demand appears stable. Tourism is strong. Direct consumer sales feel like a license to print money. A neighbor sells a vineyard at a premium, so the new buyer underwrites the next purchase assuming the premium is going to persist. Banks lend against land values. Investors fund brand extensions. Hospitality experiences multiply. Everyone is building capacity. And then demand shifts. Consumer preferences change. Younger drinkers might choose cocktails or spirits versus some of the more staid vintages. Corporate gifts change. Restaurant and wine programs get squeezed. Distribution channels consolidate. Shelf space becomes more expensive to buy and harder to defend. Then Trump tariffs came into place and most Canadian provincial liquor boards boycotted U.S. wines and spirits. Canada historically accounts for about $450 million in purchases each year out of a total about $1.7 billion from Napa and Sonoma. So when Canada stopped buying, that was an additional hit to an already softening market. And so when demand softens, the first thing that happens is not necessarily bankruptcy. First thing that happens is discounting. And discounting is poison in a prestige category. If you're a premium winery and you have to sell excess inventory off through price channels, you're not just reducing margin, you're damaging your brand. The customer starts to expect the sale. The tasting room visitor starts to negotiate. The distributor demands concessions, and your cost structure, which was built for premium pricing, doesn't shrink quickly. I saw it firsthand. A very high-quality Sauvignon Blanc from the second oldest winery in Napa was $14 a bottle if you bought a case. But then they discounted the tasting fee for 3 people down to $0. So the tasting fee of $45 times 3 is $135, and the case of wine is $168. So in essence, if you committed to the tasting, you were buying an entire case of wine for $33. And that's nuts. Now, if I wasn't flying the next day, I would have bought a case myself. So then layer on top of that rising regulation. Wine country is famous for rules, for environmental protection, for water constraints, for labor regulation, limits on events and traffic and development. Again, I'm not arguing whether those regulations are good or bad. They just raise the cost for operating. They limit optionality, and they create a barrier to pivoting if revenue falls. In a stable or growing demand environment, regulation can look like a protective moat. It keeps competitors out, but when demand shrinks, regulation becomes a cage. It's not a moat anymore because you can't pivot. If you have a large facility and you want to convert part of the operation to a different use, maybe hospitality or events or a different product line, those moves often require approvals and hearings and input from the neighbors. Time is a luxury you don't have when your inventory is aging and you're burning cash. So what do the operators do? They try and hold on. They cut marketing, which reduces demand even further. They reduce staffing, which can damage customer experience, and they defer maintenance. They discount, which erodes the brand. Or they borrow, which works until it doesn't, because debt service doesn't care about your story. Well, this is where the parallel comes to real estate. A winery is not just a brand, it's real estate plus a business, and in many cases the land carries an enormous valuation because people capitalized on the romance, not the cash flow. Land doesn't generate cash by itself. It's the enterprise that generates the cash flow. So when the enterprise becomes marginal, places like Napa and Sonoma, the alternatives are very heavily constrained. You cannot easily redevelop. You can't easily repurpose. And you can't easily subdivide. So the exit options become narrow and they become vanishingly small. The takeaway for investors is not that wine is bad or tourism's dead. The takeaway is that you have to underwrite for the durability of demand, not the beauty of the asset. And you have to measure regulatory risk as a cash flow variable, not an abstract talking point. So there's a few questions you want to ask yourself. In any industry, who can add supply quickly if margins rise, and how long does it take to respond? Who is the true customer, and what substitutes are emerging that solve the customer's need in a different way? And then third, if demand falls by 20%, what levers do you have to adapt? Can you change the use, change the product, change the channel, or change the cost structure? And if so, how quickly? If the answer is not fast, then you're not buying an asset, you're buying rigidity, and rigidity is fragile. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.